Hello again, Kathleen Hart here from the Little Piece of Heart blog. Today I'm going to be showing you a low-carb recipe for meatball parmesan. Now I'm not Italian, however, this meatball recipe is amazing and it has even fooled some Italian people into thinking I'm Italian. Maybe someday I'll tell you guys what nationality I really am. Here's a hint, 100% something and it's not Italian. But anyway, back to the parmesan. First, what I like to do is an old trick that my dad used to do for his meatballs. We're going to take onions and garlic and we're actually going to saute them in a little bit of olive oil before we even add them to the meatball mixture. So here I have a pretty small to medium sized onion. We're going to cut the ends off of this and take the skin off, and then we're going to chop it into a small dice, and then we're going to saute it on the stove with the garlic. That when you saute it beforehand, you really don't get that sharp oniony taste. Instead, you get a really mellow onion flavor that's soft all throughout the meatball. So we're going to cut this pretty small for that exact reason. Okay, one half done. Move that off to the side, and then we'll get our other half going. A little bit extra skin on there. Okay. One of the best parts about this meatball recipe is that to lower the carbs, I actually replaced some of the what would be breadcrumbs in the recipe with Parmesan cheese. It keeps the meatball moist, but then it also adds really great salty flavor. Okay. Now, to go along with our onion, we're gonna do my favorite, garlic cloves. Now, I like a lot of garlic, so does my family, so I'm never too shy about adding extra garlic cloves. In this case, some of the cloves are a little smaller than what I normally would like, so actually I'm gonna use a little bit extra just to make up for the volume that I need. But in the end, I'd say for this size onion, maybe 2 tablespoons worth of garlic is what I like. But you can surely add more, or you can add less, depending on if you like it or not. The meatballs will still be amazing, don't worry. We're gonna pop each one of these with the knife, just to loosen up the skin. And then, we're gonna peel the skin and just do a fine mince on all the garlic. I like to do a big rough chop on all of the garlic pieces just to get them into a little bit smaller chunks. And then what I'm gonna do is just run my knife back and forth, get them in a big pile like this, and I'm gonna run my knife back and forth through them all. Just back and forth until the dice is small. All right, that looks a lot better. Okay, so now the next step is we're going to saute these. Now we're going to move over to the stove and we're going to saute the onion and garlic that we just chopped in about a tablespoon to a tablespoon and a half of olive oil. Now we want to do it just so that the onion gets soft and a little bit translucent and the garlic gets soft also, but we want them to not really cook too much. We just want to soften them. So we're going to have the heat on medium-low just to get them working and get them warmed up. Now that we're at the stove, we're going to put the burner on to medium-low. And there we go. We're going to warm up our pan and then we're going to add in our olive oil. Okay, like I said, about a tablespoon, maybe a little bit more I put in there, but you want to coat the bottom of this little small pan because we want to keep the onions and garlic really moist and we don't want them to burn because then you get a really bitter taste and that is not good for these meatballs. Go in with our onion. Nice sizzle, that's what we want here. Okay, that means that our pan is just as hot as we want it to be. Put in the garlic right on top of that. Okay, now we're just going to stir this around, get everything coated in the oil. And we're actually just going to let these sweat out for a few minutes, just until they soften and until they're, translucent. We're going to want to keep an eye on these though, because even though we have the heat on low, they still could burn. So we're just going to keep watching it and keep stirring for a few more minutes. Okay. Cooking the onions, which is going to take a few minutes, so why not have a wine break? Or as I like to call it, weenie. Okay guys, we're ready to assemble the meatball mixture. Now, we have our onions and garlic that we reserved from earlier that we did on the stove. They've cooled down. We don't want to add really, really hot ingredients into raw meat because we don't want to start cooking it with that before it gets on the stove. So what I'm going to do is add all the other ingredients in, and the meat goes last. Because when we start mixing everything, we want those ingredients to be incorporated before we add them into the meat mixture. So we're going to start with our Parmesan cheese. Remember I told you this is going to be the low carb alternative to using a lot of breadcrumbs to hold everything together. So that goes in. Then next we have our beaten egg. I took 2 eggs and just kind of poked them with a fork a couple of times just to get them working, so we're not putting whole eggs in here. It's just a little easier to mix everything together. So we got that in there. Next, we are going to add a little bit of breadcrumbs. Now these are panko breadcrumbs, and I really like these because as you can see, they're really nice and light, and they're almost like there's so much air pumped into them that they're not as thick as other breadcrumbs. And when you use them, the carb count is a little high, but we're only going to use 1/4 cup with 2 pounds of meat. So when you really think about it, the carb count is still very low for this. But we're just using them as a little bit of a binder. We're going to put 1/4 cup right in. Next, we're going to do a little bit of Italian seasoning. And for this, we're going to do about 1 teaspoon. Just to flavor up that meat. Put that right in there. And then we're also going to do 1 teaspoon of pepper. So I'm going to take that, put that in too. Now for salt, I'm going to use a little bit less of the salt, just because I like to salt things at the very end. This is good too, just to add a little bit to the meat before it cooks. So I'm going to use about 3/4 teaspoon. So now we're going to mix everything up before we add the meat in. And I just want to use a fork and just kind of get that egg working and getting everything a little bit moist. Then when we add the meat in, it'll be added into a mixture that's already been mixed. All the spices getting all over all of the parm. Perfect. So there we go. We have kind of like a thick paste going for us now. Okay, so we're going to add in all of our onions and garlic. Right there. Okay. Then we're going to give this one last mix just to get them all incorporated. Get everything off the sides. Okay, so now we're going to add in our meat. And this is the part where I'm going to de-ring myself because I don't want to get meat stuck in there. We're going to take our meat and drop it right in. And we're going to kind of smash it down and get all of these ingredients mixed together. And I think your hands are your best tool. With a spoon, this would kind of take forever. And I don't even think it would work that well. Clean hands, of course. Okay. So we don't want to overmix this. We just want to get everything mixed together. And then we'll be ready to make some meatballs. Okay. Great. Everything's mixed together, so I'm going to move over to the stove. And we're going to form some meatballs. And I'm going to drop them right into a skillet just to get browned on all the different sides. And then we're going to actually finish them off in the oven where we create the Parmesan. Alright, so now we're going to start forming our meatballs and sauteing them on the stove. We're not actually cooking them, we're just getting a nice brown crust on the outside. So I'm going to drop in a couple pads of butter, and then we're also going to add in a little bit of olive oil so we can get these babies cooking. Alright, perfect. Couple tablespoons. You want the bottom of the pan covered once again because we want to keep them moist and we don't want them to burn. Heat is on about medium. So now what we're going to do is start forming our meatballs. I have a 2 tablespoon scoop here, and I'm going to scoop, form them with my hands, and then drop them in one by one. Here I go. Okay, my second batch of meatballs is just done browning on the second side. And as you can see, the middle is not cooked. We just wanted to get a nice crust on the outside. So I'm gonna remove these over here to my paper towel lined plate, just to catch any of the extra oil. And then, as soon as I get all my meatballs out onto my paper towel lined plate, we're gonna go over and assemble our meatball parmesan. Okay, here we go. Ready to do the parmesan part. Now, I have homemade tomato sauce that I made the other day that I had in the fridge. So I'm gonna actually use that, but you could totally use any jarred sauce that you like. You can also make your own. It's totally up to you. This is the cool part where you can kind of mix and match and do as much cheese as you want, as much sauce as you want. I personally like a lot of sauce and a lot of cheese. But when you have a low carb sauce that you made homemade and know exactly what's in it, and you have low carb cheese, you can't go wrong. So what we're gonna do is take our sauce and layer it on the inside of the pan. I'm using a large dish this time only because I want the meatballs to spread out so I can get cheese and sauce on every one. So I'm gonna use the sauce and we're gonna coat the bottom of the pan. And it's probably about a cup of sauce, maybe even more than I'm using right now. Then what we're gonna do, make sure the whole bottom is covered so that we don't burn the bottom of the meatballs. We're gonna take our meatballs and layer them out perfectly so that they're all spaced evenly apart. I'm trying not to let them touch because I want them to each get cheese to kind of coat the top of them and then also melt right around each one. Hence the Parmesan. Okay. I have a couple extra, so I'm actually gonna just kind of fit them in here. I don't want any to go to waste. And even though I made 2 batches of meatballs, I'm not gonna make 2 batches of this. I'm gonna fit every meatball in this tray. So here we go. There's a couple little spots I can stick them in. There we go. The layer of meat is done. So we're done with this. And then we're going to move on to our cheese. Now I'm using mozzarella cheese and I'm also whole milk mozzarella cheese, and I'm also going to use Parmesan cheese, but this Parmesan is different than the one I used earlier. It actually is grated just like the mozzarella, so it should melt around the same time. So we're going to go in first with the Parmesan cheese. Just do a little bit right on top of each meatball. I'm going to go kind of light because I'm going to do a couple layers of cheese. And this is up to you, how much cheese you want to use. I like cheese. We all like cheese, in my family at least. So I'm going to go kind of heavy. All right, so each meatball has a little sprinkling of cheese. Then we're going to do a little bit of mozzarella. And the mozzarella will kind of spread a little bit easier. I got a fine grate on this one. So we're going to spread on each one. Okay. Take your time too. You want to make sure each meatball gets love because you want the cheese to kind of coat everything like I said before. So we're going to do another layer of Parmesan. And then even the cheese that doesn't make it on top of the meatballs is going to get into that sauce on the bottom and kind of get all gooey, and it's going to be phenomenal. Okay, one more layer of mozzarella and then I think we'll be good. Okay, so I think we're good for right now. What we're gonna do is stick this into a 375-degree oven for about 15 minutes. Now, if you see the cheese is kind of getting too browned, you might wanna cover it with tin foil. I find that I like when the cheese gets brown like that, and I'm actually going to stick it under the broiler for a minute or two when it's done cooking the meatballs on the inside. So here we go, put this in the oven. We're ready. Just came out of the oven, 15 minutes in 375, and then 2 minutes underneath the broiler just to crisp up that cheese. The last thing I'm gonna do, I chopped up some parsley. Just gonna put that right on top. Oh my God, this smells amazing. Okay, that's it. Meatball Parmesan. The best part is it's low carb. We have a low carb sauce. We have low carb cheese, low carb meatball mixture, only a 1/4 cup of breadcrumbs in this whole plate. That's great because you could probably serve at least 4 people with this. Unless they're really hungry, then probably 4. I'm gonna serve myself up one right here and we're gonna taste this baby. All right. Looks really hot, so bear with me. Oh my gosh, look at how moist that is. And the cheese, just gooey right on there. And the sauce was the perfect bottom for this dish because it gets nice and bubbly and it cooks the meatball up from the bottom. I'm gonna actually take a smaller piece. Let's see, get a little bit of cheese in there, some sauce. Oh my gosh, it smells amazing. I can only imagine how it tastes. Come on, that's amazing. The meatball is so moist, so flavorful. Cooking the onion and the garlic beforehand soften them up so much that they melt right into your mouth. Gooey cheese, homemade sauce. What more could you want? That is my low carb meatball parmesan. To get the entire recipe as well as measurements, go on to my blog, Little Piece of Heart, and you can find everything that you need. And I'll see you next time.